Okay. I don't know if that's how that works, but 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. I'm going to call this regular meeting to order. Nikki, please call the roll.
Nikki Austin is present. Jim Curran.
Present.
Mike Davis.
Present.
Mike Fraseth.
Present.
Nicole Josephs.
Present.
Teresa Keen.
Present.
Steve Mayer.
Present.
Terry Montgomery.
Present.
And Phil Vosberg just stepped out. He is here.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
right?
he's here.
Yeah.
Okay, so our September 22nd, 2025 regular Board of Education meeting is officially in session. We have a quorum ready to go. First item up is to approve our agenda. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mike Fraseth,
Second.
second by Nicole. In discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Agenda is approved. Next up, we have our consent items. Is there any board member who wishes to remove anything from the consent agenda? None, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent items as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Terry,
Second.
second by Mike Davis. I'll read these into the record. We've got 5 items tonight. First, to approve the minutes from our September 8th meeting. Second, to approve the support staff hiring of Guadalupe Schaefer Olmos, educational assistant at Northside Elementary. We've got several community donations to approve. I'll read these out. School supplies for each school donated by the Colony Brands Bakery employees. 2 large bags of bouncy balls from Amberlyn and Maybelline Martel Villa and family to Parkside Elementary. Sand toys, soccer, and basketballs from Parkside grandparents to Parkside Elementary. School supplies from Amber Lee Aguilar to Parkside Elementary. $200 in Walmart gift cards for each school from Monroe United Methodist Church Kids Fund. $4,000 from Monroe Morning Optimist Club, $800 per school. For classroom and enrichment needs, $1,000 worth of aluminum and steel stock to MHS metals and machine classes from Faith Engineering. Tempera paint donation to Northside and Parkside Elementary School art departments from United Methodist Church. Backpack Buddies, $50 from Donald Jr. and Bonnie Barker, $30 from Marianne Johnson, $1,000 from Samuel and Emma Nicholson, supporting the Monticello Youth Foundation. Next, approve our Northside safety drill and approval of the middle school safety drill. All right, any discussion before we vote?
Just another comment. I mean, every week we go through this donation after donation after donation from the community to the district and the different programs. And I just think it's worth mentioning over and over and over again how much it's appreciated and how much the community support means to the district and to the board.
Thanks, Mike, well said. And that's every donation from some of the really large donations, including one we're going to talk about later tonight, and everything down to, $30 for Backpack Buddies. Everything's really appreciated and it means a lot to our students and families. Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Consent items are approved. Next up, we got public comment. I think we're good. Student liaison report, so unfortunately Ann's not able to make it here tonight. Look forward to hearing from her next time. No old business, on to new business. We got a big night tonight. So I'm not gonna steal any of Joe's thunder. I'm gonna turn it over to Joe to talk about
You can steal some thunder if you want. If you want to say some things.
I will later.
All right.
Turn it over to Joe to talk about the
Yeah, so this has become really kind of a tradition as to how we're opening up board meetings now, celebrating the variety of generous sponsorships. Mike just said really well that we're fortunate to live in such a generous, caring community. The sponsorship agreement that we're sharing tonight is historic. It's really quite significant. Colony Brands has been a business, and Colony Brands Foundation have always been incredibly generous and very supportive of not only the school district, but our community as a whole. And when we first started this process, one of the first businesses that we reached out to was Colony Brands. And they made it clear from the start that they wanted to be a part of this project and wanted to do so in a significant way. Through the last several months, we've been working with them to make sure we identify the right way to do this and appropriate timing to make this announcement. But we are very excited to announce that Colony Brands has agreed to provide a $1 million donation over the next 5 years to secure the lifetime sponsorship and naming rights for the Colony Brands Fieldhouse. This is a big deal. We're very fortunate to have community partners and leaders such as John Bauman, who is really the voice of this project and trying to get it done. He, as everyone knows and has worked with John, he is one of the more civic-minded, caring, generous people that you'll ever meet. And his desire to be a part of this project is pretty significant, especially when you consider the context of some of the other giving that's happened within the community already, whether it be the YMCA, the Pocket Park, any number of other projects that you could list. And so I know if John were here, he would want me to mention that this is, due to the good work of the Colony Brands Foundation. It certainly relates to the generosity of Pat Kubley and Ryan Kubley. But ultimately, we're able to take $1 million and invest it in our high school and specifically in our fieldhouse space to ensure that that continues to have everything it needs to be a clean, modern space for kids and their physical education and a variety of activities both through the school and the community going forward. So we're just beyond honored for this gift and couldn't be more thrilled to make this announcement. Ron, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I think Joe mentioned under Pat and Ryan Kubley, I think before they rebranded themselves, the Colony Brands Foundation, it was the Kubley Family Foundation, it was their foresight of starting some of those investments that has allowed them to be this generous to the district and the community, and Ryan's very active on the Colony Brands Foundation board and sits at the head of that. I was just trying to make a few notes here as we were starting our talk about, some of the support over the years. I think when we first did our first CAD lab at the high school, Colony Brands funded that. As we decided to dip our toes into one-to-one, they provided the first class level iPads so that we could dip our toe into it and see how that worked. With that, we knew we needed wireless access at the middle school, so they funded that. We then decided we were moving to one-to-one district-wide using the Chromebooks, and so we knew we had to invest into the high school for wireless access to do that. And then the plan was a year or two later, we were going to do the elementary schools and we had time. And they funded that wireless access at the elementaries. And then they helped us pilot the elementary Spanish program, which was very popular. Unfortunately, staffing wise, we just can't find elementary Spanish teachers, and some of our elementary Spanish teachers have now become ELL teachers for us. So that program isn't continuing, but over the last, and I can't go back in time to tell you exactly how long that is, but over the last, I'd say 15 years, they've been tremendous supporters of the district, so greatly appreciated.
Board members for questions of administration? Reactions?
No questions, just gratitude.
There's, it's
I
amazing.
don't think anybody in this town can say they haven't benefited, or any organization can say that they haven't benefited in some way from Colony Brands. It's just awesome, the way they care about the community. So very much appreciative of their donation and continued efforts always.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, given everything that's going on in the world, this hasn't been the easiest year for Colony Brands to navigate. And the fact that the foundation has still stepped up at this level, I don't want to say it was surprising, but I think it just speaks to their level of commitment, whether they're having a great year or maybe a challenging year. They are committed and supportive regardless, and I just truly appreciate them.
Yeah, and maybe just a, I'll just say it feels really, really special for me. Certainly this is a community-facing gift that is gonna benefit thousands of kids and families and folks all around, really Greene County, right, for this facility. And for me, it's very personally meaningful. You know, my dad worked for Colony Brands for 40 years. So I was a kid, grew up with Colony Brands t-shirts and hats and, you know, working Badger Booster days and everything like that. And so it's, also I had, my dad played basketball in high school, and one of my friends looked up the stats of his high school career compared to my high school career. And there was a 3 to 4x multiplier on every stat line of what he produced versus what I produced. So it means a lot that when I go into this facility and you know, get to see that name you know, for years and years to come. So just want to make a personal note of gratitude to the Kubley family, to John and Colony Brands for their support. Of course, not just for you know, my dad or my family, but for all the kids and families who are going to benefit from this. And with that, look for a motion to approve the lifetime sponsorship agreement for the Monroe High School field house as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Terry, second by Nikki. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, next up, informational item. Got our MHS building project update. Turn over to administration for kind of direct us.
Yeah, Ron, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to share. We have Dylan from CG Schmidt here. We have Ryan from Huffman Keel. Just two of part of our amazing team that we're working with, and I say that with a smile, but in all sincerity, we're really fortunate to work with a great team that's taken good care of us. So, Ron, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to tee up for these guys.
Nothing earth shattering, you know, we're at the point of the project now where there's so many subcontractors on the job and so many different teams out there that are working, that certainly CG Schmidt and Huffman Keel are making sure they're coordinating all of that. But it's at the point now where week to week, the amount of work that gets done and the changes in the building on a weekly basis is kind of staggering. You know, I mentioned during finance that, you know, I think our September pay was nearly $7 million. And so that gives you an idea of how much work is getting done on a monthly basis at this point. After, you know, way back when it was like, oh, we moved, you know, a couple $100,000 worth of dirt this month. It's just, there's a lot of good stuff getting done, right? And again, having a great team coordinating that. I won't steal Dylan's thunder. I think he's gonna kind of walk us around the building during the video, if not in advance of it, to kind of talk about what all got done the last couple weeks to month since our last update and what's coming down the road. So turn it over to, I don't know if Dylan's gonna go first and then Ryan, the budget?
Yep. So, big things this last month, we're really working on enclosure and a lot of the exterior athletic facilities. So, a lot of stuff done in football concessions. We're getting ready to kind of start bringing that up. So that's exciting. I don't know if anyone saw the turf is looking pretty good. Got a little color out there besides brown or grays. So that's really cool to see. We've got a big start on siding, insulated metal panels and coping to edge out the roof. The roof's, I'd say 98, 99% done. We're finishing up steel in the auditorium. Baseball has made huge headway in this last month. We've got a lot of underground and drain tile in, some of the batting cage slabs done, a lot of curb and binder down. So basically all of our concrete curbs, we got quite a bit down this last month, and a lot more blacktop binder, so a little less dust. You know, it's really nice for parking and storage space for stuff. So we're really making a lot of good headway on that. A lot into paint. I mean, we took casework delivery today, so we're going to start putting cabinets in kind of the west part of the building. Really starting to drive in that auditorium too. We're kind of finishing up catwalks, so that's pretty exciting. We're getting a little concrete put down in there as well, so we're going to be starting to getting all that underground in, and that auditorium's gonna start to take shape here pretty soon. Yeah, if you wanna start the video.
This is the big milestone, and then we'll have a monthly, this month's one after this. It's still always amazing to see how wet November was.
I remember that one well. We're starting to get a lot of landscaping done as well.
That was November.
Get a lot of that black dirt covered up.
But the hope is, right, Dylan, that you're gonna have the HVAC up and running by the time heating season comes. So rather than having to pump in temporary heat, we'll be able to heat from the systems within.
Yep, that's right.
Obviously, we'll have all kinds of filters on them to block out all the construction dust. But
Yeah, we usually use construction filters, and we pay heavy attention to that to make sure we're not, missing out on that. We make sure someone, specific person changes those out, so.
you see grass?
Really brought a lot of life to that loading dock area too. We've got the concrete poured back there, and it's really getting going on a lot of those overhead doors.
No center logo that day, that went on later that afternoon.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's a high school.
And then we got this month's one that I'll pull up in a second. Then if you needed to pause so you can point things out, just let her know.
Yeah, we're gonna start pulling a couple of these trailers out here. We're gonna get some more of this binder down. You'll still see our trailer out there, but I'm gonna start kind of minimizing that, and some of the earlier trades are gonna start getting some of their stuff out of there, make some room.
Sandra, are you able to maximize it, the bottom right corner, or won't that work?
There.
You
Thank
can
you.
see here
Can
a
you
lot of
pause here for a second, Jenner? We'll let you pause. What do we see in, I guess that's the blacktop down there that's now finished. I thought from the other angle it was dirt along the pond that they're working on the one day, but.
Yeah, so they're really starting to spread out a lot of that topsoil.
Yep,
We got a
that's
lot of
good.
that binder down and the curb kind of establishing where the roads are. We're starting to get grade around the building really nice there too. We just set a lot of those precast stones and kind of finishing up the windows. We're really close here. This next 2 to 3 weeks, this whole clear story area on the south, we're gonna be installing those frames and glazing there. So that's a big area to close up for us, kind of attacking this middle area last. We poured that front area too, so we could measure for all that storefront glass for the front entrance, so that's pretty cool.
When are you looking to put the last panel in the end of the field house? Is that, November or before then, do you think?
Hopefully before then.
Now you can go, Jenner. Yeah, they're removing the dirt that I did see earlier, so I wasn't imagining it.
Nope, all down here, they're moving all down. We're gonna be grading out this east side here, once we get far enough on these, actually the tennis courts here, once we, start to establish that and get the asphalt done, that east side you see here, the southeast corner is gonna get graded out. There's a stair that goes in over there, so, there's a couple stairs on the exterior and a meandering concrete path that kind of works its way up from this lower parking lot up to that, upper patio. So you're gonna see that going in here pretty soon as well.
Tennis courts, I believe you have the poles for the fence as well as the nets.
Field looks like it's photoshopped in.
Got the big lights up, everything. I know there was a question last time about some stuff with the FAA that's all been submitted and approved, so we're all good with that. There was no issue. A bit of grass there. You'll see when it comes around in a minute, kind of the neighboring property, just a short update on that. They're working on the Mass X and grading there. So they're kind of excavating, moving dirt around, getting to grade. It's kind of just off screen here, and you can see they're kind of digging for that shared lift station as well. Just starting to come into view here. You can see where they're digging that down in the back corner.
Yeah, basically they have the entire property tore up pretty good.
Yeah, they move pretty quick.
Oh, hold on, pause 1 second there. See in the upper right of the screen, you can see the, road going around the well through the,
Oh.
north end of the, north side property. So that'll be the start of Cheesemaker Drive, coming around the well and then across, the current road, and then they'll snake up in there and join with our, main drive, side drive there.
Rod, will that existing roadway stay open from?
They'll close off that little corner down there. Obviously, they need to allow property to the one property that's down there, but they'll close off the little corner, basically that property, and the people going to the well will use that, but otherwise that road will be, I believe, blocked off. So you'll come in and you'll go directly around onto the new road.
A lot of stuff going on in baseball and softball over here. You can see the batting cage right there. We got the fence up along the property line over there. A lot of straw mat down, so making a lot of progress over here. And you can't really see it, but the retaining wall, big retaining wall down in the left hand side there is also finished.
Privacy fence up by the residential area there too is, really looks really nice, I think. The neighbors should be happy with that.
We've also started filling a lot of these islands with topsoil, so get some plantings in.
How many people are working on site at one time at this point? I mean, there's gotta be so many.
150
Yeah.
to, anywhere from 150 to 200.
Okay.
Yeah, depending upon the day and what crews are on site, right?
Right.
I mean, you think of like the field where, I know they got some work yet to do, but I mean, for about 2 weeks as they were really in the heart of that, turf project, I mean, there was suddenly an extra like 15 people, just out there working on that, so.
Anyone have any questions on any progress update?
I mentioned 150, 200 people, and I see your safety scorecard went up from a pretty low number to decent the last time and now 100%. That's
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going really well.
pretty impressive with the number of people that are working there right now.
Yep, and we've hired another safety manager, and they've been doing a really good job, keeping track and coming down pretty often. It's a bit of a drive for them, but they've been doing awesome, supporting a lot of the subcontractors and making sure everyone's not only compliant, but, looking out for everyone else is the important thing.
Yeah, I think when Tony was here last, or a couple of months ago, and they had the 1 month when the score was low, they talked about putting an emphasis on it, and it wasn't just him telling the board that. You guys with the follow through with each and every subcontractor and some of the, just reporting that you require them to do for your corporate staff to know what's going on. I mean, it was pretty impressive to see how, you guys have said it, and we were at 100 for much of the project, and okay, that's just 100, but I mean, when we had a month dip, it really showed how important it is.
Yeah, with the progress we've been making too, you get this far in the project and it becomes a lot cleaner, less dust. We're really trying to make sure we can, to deliver a high quality product, make sure we have a clean, nice site, and that is definitely reflected in the safety as well, You're not tripping over stuff and you got a nice, clean site, it's a safe site.
I think it was Ryan, I think it was maybe Alex said it to me the one day, you also then, when you get to this stage, you notice in the attitude of the workers, not only the nice dry weather we've had for a while, but also the fact that, you're not walking through mud and dust every day and,
Makes a big difference. The other thing that really impressed me when I walked through a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, was just really how unobstructed the hallways, the steps, hand railings, everything like that. If you did have a little bit of a lip, it was marked, you know, different things like that. Fire extinguishers, and they were very, very evident as to where they were, you know, things like that. That meant a lot. Yeah, doing a great job on that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, they're doing a great job keeping the site clean. I will say that it is, if any of you have construction experience, Mike, I know you do, it is really difficult to keep a job site clean. It's really difficult to keep it, not just construction debris, but just like people's lunch and wrappers and stuff. And it is my biggest pet peeve. And so it's the thing I harp on where people get upset at me for harping on so much. And the job site's just been great. Like the subs listen, they want a clean site too. And so it's been great. I have not had to say a single thing, which has been pretty spectacular. So, but yeah, just to what Dylan was saying, I mean, clean site's safe site, right? You're not catching your toe on stuff, you're not, slipping on things, so. I don't have a lot of news today, which is a good thing. We are 57% complete with the referendum, 56% complete with the high school. Like Ron said, we had the biggest pay app of the school's construction this past month. We had summer blitz, we're ending, and it's funny, it's summer hard. Labor Day hits, and then no one talks about anything but we gotta get this stuff done before the weather turns. So we've hit that part now, so it's like what we have to accomplish before the weather turns, and that's what we're working on right now. And a lot of, like Dylan said, a lot of things with the athletics that we're trying to get wrapped up in grading and, things that will get us to next spring. And obviously enclosure, that's the huge one. But making great progress. We did have a couple change orders this time. One was a straight credit, a lumping of credits for certain things that we changed. We had a credit because of some concrete. We had a credit because we removed a toe board around the indoor walking track. And those were offset slightly with, we upgraded some of the drain tile in the baseball area. So if you lump all those together, it ended up being a credit of $30,000. And then we transferred more funds from the GMP to the owner's budget for those owner direct contracts that we've been dealing with this whole time, primary earthwork, but also flooring, and I'm missing what, landscaping. And so those are the ones that have been transferred. So they're change orders, but not change orders, where we've been extracting money from the owner's contingency. We will have some soon. We're wrapping up some things some work that happened with the tennis courts. So that will be coming, and some other miscellaneous, but nothing major. And we should have those next time we meet. So those should be wrapped up. Like Mike said, we're back up to 100% on the safety scorecard, which is pretty spectacular. And we're tracking really well with our burn rate on our contingency as we've not had much of a spend in the last handful of months. Small things. In the budget, it's reflected there also. We can see that we've caught up again with that large pay app, so we've had a big jump in percentage since the last time we met. We've had some line item transfers to make more sense of how invoicing is coming in. It's nothing that you have to concern yourself with, but it makes it easier to track invoices. We were carrying 3 separate line items for the architect. We've just rolled that up into the one line item now that you can see under professional services, the 4.7 million. And that has been because they lump their invoices, and so it makes it really difficult to extract, and it's actually impossible to extract from one of their services. And so we've just rolled it up in there, but from the tracking side, it doesn't really change anything. We're still on top of it. So furniture, we made our first down payment to release that. So we got through, like you all saw, the design, made the selections, and the 20% down payment has been paid. So they have released that order, which is awesome news. So that process is going. But that's about it. I'm not currently reflecting any funds here from the community because a lot of the donations have been on the operational side for moving into the future. But there are a few that are gonna hit the project. So Ron and Joe and I are gonna meet here probably next week to talk about how we wanna reflect that in the budget and those exact numbers and all of that. So you'll see that next time we meet. Any questions?
For CG Smith, the owner contingency is still healthy. How is the construction contingency?
Yeah, so like Ryan said, we're probably about, almost 60% completed and build. We're still, about 45% of the contingency spent, so we're tracking well.
Still tracking ahead.
Any other questions from board members before we?
Is the grading done in the auditorium, the pack?
Yeah, where are we at the pack right now?
We've poured, so orchestra pit's all poured. We just got a bunch of the steel in on the little wing slopes, where the HVAC comes up. They are mostly graded, but we're working on underground a lot in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be
It's-
like where the stage area is.
Yeah, the stage is like pretty much
Yeah.
fully graded. The back area, we're gonna pour a mud slab and that needs to be detailed a little bit.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
because they
'cause
were
they were still
starting to
working
fill
above.
it when we were there,
Yep.
and so I was just wondering what kind of progress, so, okay, thank you.
And side note, I'm bringing the entire firm down tomorrow, so, no, Wednesday, we're coming down Wednesday. So we're all taking a walk through, so a lot of the folks that have never been down here are gonna experience the school for the first time and give them a tour, and they've heard all the details, but they've just never seen it, so, so that's happening on Wednesday.
That's when I get my tour.
What's that?
That's when I get my tour is Wednesday. I'm excited.
Yeah, I would say, I shared with the board, I was at the superintendent's conference in Madison last week, and as I ran into people associated with CG Schmidt or others connected to the project, Demco, I don't know if this is just purely because this is how it's handled and people want you to feel good about your project, but the number of unsolicited comments that we received about the way this project is coming together was not what I was expecting. I mean, there seems to be a genuine enthusiasm about how this is all really come together and how it looks, and I know you all have seen the building. I think this is something that the community is gonna be really proud of once it's all said and done.
I will say specifically the fact that this is a precast building, we've had so many people ask like, how does it look? How is it going? Because it's such a savings compared to traditional construction that everyone is asking, because when you think precast building, you think the tilt-up buildings in the middle of the field that where, a warehouse. And so there is real like, concern's not the right word, that sounds negative, but real concern, like, did it work? Is it great? And is this an actual viable option moving forward that we can either tell school districts or make recommendations during value engineering if they need to, and those type of things. And so it's a known entity in the Wisconsin construction world, and they want to know how it turns out because they want to know if it's a viable, real choice for value engineering in the future for schools. So
Until we get the red on the front of the building, then I think we're really gonna have a sense. And when are we looking at that, Dylan? When's that?
Pretty quick here. They have the materials, so. Just a little bit of panels that gotta go on behind there, a little bit of work kind of under and behind it. I'd say within the next couple weeks, we should be able to get, they're getting a lot of siding on.
And I think as all the board members have commented, but certainly, I remember the first conversation around precast was, is it gonna be dark, right? That was the first question everybody had. If you walk through that building, dark is one of the last things you're ever gonna think in there.
it's great. I have a few shots on my phone that when people ask, I'm like, well, you tell me what you think. And I mean, it's always like, wow, that looks great. And so it could be a bit of a halo project for Wisconsin in that sense of just like seeing what can be done creatively when you have to do it. And I'm pretty excited about it.
I guess I have a branding question. On the north end of the high school, we'll say Monroe High School, or what will we have?
On the north
Safe
side,
block.
up high, on the, actually on the fly of the, Performing Arts Center will be a Monroe logo M. And so that's what you'll have facing toward the north. And then obviously on the front entranceway, you have Monroe High School.
There's a good combination of the words Monroe High School or Monroe and the M logo throughout. the exterior and the interior. I think it's still being refined, but I think it's a really good mix.
And then Phil, if you're asking, if you're coming in the drive, that'll be where the main monument sign will be. So if you're driving in, you'll see that. I didn't want to give you the impression you would see that from necessarily the highway though, because, but the big M up high is what you'll see from the highway, and that'll be lit at night even. And then, the monument sign, that is also Joe was there for the approval, that, thank goodness, should, where, it'll say the activities of the day or whatever, scroll on it. That'll be at that Cheesemaker Drive entrance from the north.
And we'll have the archway, with the walk up to the stadium football area. The front will be the big Monroe, and then there's a smaller, internally lit M that's in the lower, so it's a cool combination of things. It will be obvious and you won't be able to miss it, especially from the highway, yeah.
Dylan, did we get the window leakage resolved? That there was an issue with it
Yeah.
like a month or so ago?
Yep, yeah, we were just kind of making sure that, water coming down the precast face had a good drip edge above the windows, and we were putting sufficient caulk and, that we were putting the air and vapor barrier in correctly. So we made sure to pay extra attention to that and kind of refine that process and ensure that we're not getting any leakage. So, yeah, we passed on the ones in precast, and we just had our final window test today, and it was in a different opening, in a stud framed wall. So those are our only two conditions, and we've got it dialed in.
And that's a good question, Steve, because it reminds me, so like, not only for CG Schmidt, but also for some of our subs. Is that Lake City Glass who was doing that? So, we had, beside, was there a leakage concern? There was just, how did the caulking look, right? Because it was, you had a large, gap there that you were caulking around those windows. And when we made that, we identified that concern, CG Schmidt and Lake City both attacked it. Lake City actually brought in a professional caulking company that all they do is caulk. I mean, you think window installers, that's all they do is caulk windows, right? But I mean, they literally brought in a third company that all they do is do caulk, specializing. And, so I mean, that kind of is the commitment and follow through that you would hope for a situation like that.
CG Spec did hire an envelope consultant also, a third-party envelope consultant to review all conditions, but that condition as one. So a lot of the proverbial belt and suspenders on this one, so.
Good job.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fellas. All right. Next up, we've got an action item to approve the 25-26 preliminary operating budget for our 2025 annual meeting. Turn over to Ron and take it away.
Chandra, if you could, would you load the,
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
revenue
Thank
limit
you.
document? Should be the last document. I actually loaded the revenue limit last, thinking that I was gonna go all through my budget and then talk about the revenue limit at the end, but since, some of you are newer to the board and revenue limit really drives a lot of the scope of things, I decided tonight I would, kind of run through the revenue limit, in a little more detail, since we don't usually dive into it necessarily at the annual meeting, but it gives a lot of perspective, so. I'll give Chandra a second to pull it up there, yeah, and then, so the document, it used to be on one page and nobody could read it because the print was so small, so now they've kind of broken it apart into multiple sections, and I'll kind of go through, so the top left, what used to be the top left is now the top of page one there that Chandra is showing. Line one is really what was our base last year? And so our base coming forward from last year was 25.6 million. Now, a caveat there is that last number right before you see the 25.6 million gets a little bit something Jim was asking me earlier. You have some non-recurring exemptions, and usually the biggest non-recurring exemption you have, but there's other ones, is what is the exemption for declining enrollment? Because basically, if you're declining enrollment, you'll see it a little bit later, they give you a number to address that in a year, but it's only a 1-year relief and then it goes away. So I can't say, because I don't have my last year's revenue limit pulled up, I can't say all that 653,000 there is just from declining enrollment last year. However, much of that would be, and really that tells you when we get a picture, when we get to the next page as to how enrollment does drive and affect your revenue limit. As we scroll down the page to the middle, that's where you see your enrollment numbers. And so Phil had asked during finance, how does summer school factor in? And so summer school is the first line on the enrollment or membership averages. You can see for most years it's been 76, got as high as 80 one year. That was the year that we not only had a longer summer school, we also had a longer catch-up, kind of a back-to-school program in place. This year right now, that number has been finalized, but 70 was the budgeted number I was using. It may come in 1 or 2 higher than that, but I always like to be on the conservative side if I can. And so you take all the minutes of all the kids who attended summer school, divide it by a factor that says it's the equivalent of a kid for the full year. That gets you to that count of what is 70 for 2025. You then only get 40% of that towards your revenue limit. So really, it's a count of 28 kids that impacts our revenue limit. And as I said, you know, we're a little over 10,000, almost a little over 11,000 now per student on the revenue limit factor. You know, our summer school budget, you know, I didn't have the Fund 27 pulled up at the time Phil asked, but it was like 180,000 for Fund 10. And then we have our Fund 27, our special ed summer school. And then we have transportation, which is down significantly this year. But typically our summer school is basically a break-even proposition for us. You then look at what is your third Friday. You know, there's been that gradual decline, certainly from 2022 through 2025. And so that's an impact. And so you take those numbers and you look over to the right of that in the green, and there is our 3-year rolling average last year was 2243. Right now it's going to be 2185. All right, so there's a definite decrease there. So down below that, in that next section there, is the declining enrollment exemption. So what this says is based upon that decline in that 3-year average, they're gonna allow us to keep or to get an exemption when we get to the next page of $680,000 to help deal with that declining enrollment. However, the following year, when we get to 26, 27, that goes away. That's not in your base. And you'll see how that impacts on the next page. So if you scroll to the next page, we'll start at the top. Again, there was that base of 25.6 million. You divide it by last year's 3-year average. Really easy. Hey, it's $11,400 per kid. You add $325 into the equation. You're now at $11,739 per student. You apply our new 3-year average, and we're at $25,650. So remember, our base last year was 25.6. Our base this year, before that declining enrollment exemption we're gonna get, is 25.6. So our revenue limit base doesn't really grow. That additional $325 per pupil we get is almost completely offset by our decline in enrollment. So that's kind of the reality of the base. So we have that $25.65 million base, and then we have some exemptions. Some of them are recurring, some of them are non-recurring. What are our recurring exemptions? Our most common recurring exemption is transfer of service. And what is transfer of service? If we have students with major special education needs who move into our district, who've never been enrolled here before, so we have new costs, it can't just be that our special education classrooms got bigger. It has to be, we had to hire a one-to-one aide, or this program grew enough where we had to add a teacher. Then you can do a transfer of service exemption, and then those are recurring dollars that you get to keep in the base of your revenue limit going forward. That's why it's called recurring. When you get down to section 10, kind of where all those pinks are for the most part, that's your non-recurring exemptions. Obviously, the biggest non-recurring exemption is that $681,000 for the declining enrollment. So that's gonna boost our ending revenue limit for this year. However, it's gone next year. It's not starting out in that base. That's a one-time kick, just like last year we had a $643,000 exemption for this entire area. You know, last year, I think about 400 and some thousand of that was the declining enrollment, and then we did have the vouchers and things of that nature that hit us last year. What are the other things in here? If we have any taxes, adjustments, that doesn't happen that often. If we had any prior year open enrollment adjustments during the year, and again, right now I have 20,000 estimated in there. They'll give us a final number in October. What does that mean if, now that they have open enrollment that basically can happen all year long, if you have open enrollment changes that happen after the third Friday, maybe they came to us after the third Friday, some of our students went somewhere else after the third Friday, they come up with that net amount and determine an adjustment based upon students who moved during the year but after the third Friday. And then column H is the one that's growing. Last year was 170,000. This year we're projecting it to be 220,000. That's the private school voucher program. So 3 years ago it didn't exist, and now it's already about 220,000.
Ron, can you tell us how much they have to pay per pupil for private school vouchers?
How much who has to pay?
Our taxpayers, right? Because that's.
That's what we're paying.
Right, but how much is it for, like, right now, we're paying, I guess my question is, it's 11,700 per pupil for kids who go to school in our district. How much are we paying for kids to go to a private school?
Well, they get greater than our open enrollment exemption, so I would have to look up that exact number right now, but I mean, when you look at open enrollment exemption is now, close to 10, and they get a little more for some of their kids, and so.
For some reason, I thought it was even higher,
Yeah.
like for high school students.
Well, certainly it is for special ed kids, but yeah, I'll have to get that exact number for you, and that's a good question for me to know come annual meeting.
And just to confirm, we can't know where that goes or.
We don't know who those students are, where they're attending. All we get told is this is the amount of aid that we're having taken away from us, and that is getting transferred off to those private schools. And again, they could be commercial private schools, they could be parochial private schools, they could be virtual private school or virtual voucher schools. We don't know who or where they're going. We don't have, the Madison Diocese in St. Fix is not part of that program.
Right.
So I know that they're not going to St. Fix.
Right.
And so where these students are going, and how many of them, you can kind of do the math to figure out how many of them. There's approximately 20 to 22 of them, but I can't tell you who they are or where they're going. So that takes us, when we add those in, now we're up to 26.7. So if you go again up to the top and say, okay, we were at 25.6 last year, we're now at 26.7. We've got about an additional 1.1 million, and that's great. However, many of those dollars are just one-time exemptions. And in some of those dollars, in the case of like the voucher, we're only getting those voucher dollars because they're also taking it away from us, right? And so, and the reality is they're taking, as you were pointing out, to be clear, they're taking away our state aid. So that means it's backfilled by our local taxpayer dollars, right? So that's the reality of, they're taking away aid, Revenue limit gives us the total amount. If they're taking away aid, that means it's really our taxpayers who are paying for it. You scroll down, right now, our aid, estimate, for the next year, is 18.7. That's actually a little less than last year. So, Jim was asking, how could that happen? And so last year, recall, we had additional aid came in, once they took a large chunk of dollars away from Milwaukee because they weren't happy with how Milwaukee Public Schools were keeping their track of their accounting system, basically. And so they reduced their aid, which added aid to all the other districts. This year, when the legislators approved the budget, they put no additional dollars into the state aid formula. Recall, they added some dollars to, for relief of income tax. But they didn't put any dollars into, the aid formula for property tax relief. So when we talk about that $325 that was added per pupil, typically they would add a couple $100 of aid per pupil to offset some of that impact to property taxes. This year, they didn't do that. Basically, they said, we're gonna put that dollars toward income tax relief. So all districts across the state, not all, but I would say the majority of districts who I've read articles on across the state who've already had their annual meetings are all projecting an increase in their local, property tax costs because of that.
Rod, can I ask a question? Maybe you covered this already, but the increase in state aid for special ed, that, kind of in the mass media, how does it fit in?
Doesn't fit in here at all. We'll talk about it during the budget where it does fit in. But as far as the revenue limit goes, it doesn't fit in at all. But when we go through the budget, we'll talk about where it does fit in.
Ron, the declining enrollment exemption, I know you said that's one time and goes away. If we're in a situation where our enrollment declined again next year, would we then get it?
You're getting another one-time enrollment, so it's, but your base keeps dropping, or in this case, if you, up at the top where we looked, our base basically stayed exactly the same. We went from 25,601,000 to a new base of 25,650,000. So even though we got an additional $325 for every pupil we have, because of the decline in enrollment, our base basically stayed the same.
So the exemption didn't do us any good,
So
really.
you get what I'm saying, Jim?
Yeah, I was starting to do the math, yes, I guess.
So scrolling down toward the bottom where we left off, then the other two areas in 12 that we get deducted out as aid, but that are considered part of the revenue limit formula are personal property tax and computer tax exemptions. And one of these they changed last year. So the personal property exemption used to be for us, I'm gonna say it was roughly about 112,000. So between the two of them together, it was like 332. And last year they didn't know what to give us for a number in time for us to build our budgets. And they came in at 304, which is a great boon for us, more than it used to be. However, this year, because they gave it to us in advance, they're now having us factor in that full amount. Great, it lowers the taxes for our taxpayers. I liked it a lot better when it was outside of the revenue limit and wasn't a reduction as to the amount of dollars I have available in the revenue limit. But so that 520,000 is additional aid, factors into $19.2 million there altogether in state aids. And that then leads you to what can we levy? And so that's 7.5 million. We don't have a Fund 38 anymore, so that frees up all the dollars for Fund 10. And then we have levies that we have outside of the revenue cap or over and above. So we have our referendum approved debt, and so that's 5.7 million. And then we have 1,150,000, which is a slight reduction in Fund 80, which is our predominantly the Monroe Public Library and a little bit, which is our liaison officer. So I'm going to get into the budget now, but I thought that might be helpful for everybody to understand a little bit about how the revenue limit works and how it drives everything. So any questions before I pivot to the budget? All right, so we're going to go to the document that is the, look at my name on it, so the official budget adoption, and I'm going to read a little bit off of my cover sheet notes as I go through that. So you start out with the revenue limit at top. You know, with the failure of the referendum, we had to lean on our fund balance a little more in 24-25 than we typically do. 8.8 million was the highest it had ever gotten. So, I mean, we were starting from a good point. And then this year, right now, we have a $2 million budgeted deficit. We typically come in a little better than that. Again, as we talked about in 24-25, we came in better than budgeted last year. However, a lot of things have been cut and a lot of the safety nets are out there, and they're just, the likelihood of coming in greatly under that or better than that isn't great. So we'll probably come in, as I told Phil in finance, you know, if these numbers would hold after the annual meeting, you know, we might be 3.5 to 4 million, but you know, it's not like we're gonna make up $1 million somewhere anymore. That just, those realities are gone. Scrolling to the middle where we have the revenues, but I'm gonna jump down to the bottom, but you don't have to jump all the way to the bottom, Chandra, but so the reality is our total revenues went from 30,938,000 to 31,122. So this is where I gotta jump back to give myself a little help here because I didn't write my number here. You know, so our revenues are going up 0.6%. So at a time when inflation, I mean, rates, certainly our insurance rates are going up much higher than that. Electrical costs are going up even higher than that. But at a time when inflationary rates are significantly higher than 0.6%, our revenue is growing 0.6% for the coming year. Looking at it, starting, I think where Chandra probably is up at the, starting at the top, beginning of the revenues, 7.5 million for taxes. It's an increase from last year. Again, it's driven by the fact that our aid is actually going down from last year. No additional dollars were put in the aid formula, so that means taxes carry a greater burden. However, it's still 8.5, or still $1 million less than it was 2 years ago. So you have to kind of put it in the context of, yep, it's an increase from last year, but from 2 years ago, two things happened. One is we didn't pass our operating referendum, but the other thing that factored in there was we did see that increase in aid last year. And so those two factors drove it down last year. And so some of that is coming back by no increase in aid. Interest on investments showing a reduction. That's a sign of both the interest rates as well as the fact that we have a reduced fund balance. So the 280 interest on investments is reducing. Going down, we have our open enrollment in dollars there at 340. And then when you get down to the 600, that's all your state sources. Your small categorical aids like your transportation aid and your library aid are all in the 610s. And then there's that big chunk of general state aid. And again, last year, you can see it jumped all the way from 17.6 up to 18.95. Now it's reducing down to 18,650. So $300,000 of that increase in taxes is because we're seeing a reduction in our state aid. Not big changes in our other state programs. A couple of them, mainly like the one where we evaluate teachers and used to get some aid dollars went away, so we see some reductions there. And in the federal programs, or I should say that's still in the state program, in the 690s, the two big areas in the 690s would be your per pupil aid, which declines a little bit. They haven't changed that allocation in years. It declines a little bit with the enrollment. And then those two other revenues that we saw for the computer exempt and personal property exemptions, they also fall in the 690s. When you get into the 700s, not a lot of changes last year versus this year. Federal dollars aren't great or aren't high. And if you compare them to where they were a couple of years ago when ESSER dollars were still available and when we also had some, just greater allocations and even some of our general federal aids, it was more. And so federal dollars are also shrinking and tightening up a little bit. Which takes us to the bottom where I said 31.1 million compared to 30.9, so it's a 0.6% increase. Expenditures, I'm gonna get to the bottom line first, and then I'm gonna circle back to Phil's question earlier about special ed aid. Expenditures, if you go to the bottom line, you're talking the difference between a $33,090,000 budget a year ago versus a $33,122,000 budget this year. So when people say, I thought you said you're making all these cuts. We did, despite the fact, inflation is growing at, 2 to 3% or more in some areas. Our budget grew 0.1%. And so in order for that to happen, we had to make significant reductions, which we did. Bill asked about how does the additional dollars for special education aid come into place. And so special education aid gets all special education costs and all special education revenues are handled in Fund 27. And the difference between the Fund 27 costs and the Fund 27 revenues is the transfer from Fund 10 for the net cost to the district for special ed. You see that in the 410,000 line, which is interfund transfers. And so you can see last year that was 4 million, and this year it's 3.6 and change. And the reason for that reduction in the transfer from Fund 10 is because of the increase in special education aid in Fund 27. So that's where you're seeing it. It is an offset against our Fund 10 budget. It does save us, but that's kind of the backwards way we get to it. The revenues go into Fund 27, which means we have to transfer less from Fund 10 over to 27. So that's a real thing, right? I mean, we said we were hoping for that, and we got the increase, not necessarily the full increase we would have liked, but we did see an increase in special ed aid, and so that certainly did reduce that transfer. Fund 21 and 27, this, that they're both in there muddies it a little bit, but it's basically the combination of what Fund 21 was originally just gifts to the district. They've now added all activity accounts into Fund 21, and then Fund 27 is all special ed. So the reason you see a fund balance in there is really that's telling you the fund balance of all the activity and gift accounts, because Fund 27 special ed nets out to zero every year by that transfer from Fund 10. So the fund balance you see there is either balances of gifts that we have or balances from student activity accounts. Over 600,000 of that is balance of student activity accounts. Fund 3839, it's set up that the levy will increment a little each year, set to be, and I think it was based upon like a 2% property valuation growth over years, to kind of offset that. And so it does increment up a little bit when you see the total revenues compared to last year. But as we pointed out in the in the finance committee meeting, the cost of interest is going down and the amount that we're paying off is going up. And so you can see, next year, the debt will drop from nearly 3 million down to 81.3 million. And over the years, the interest will continue to get less until at the back end, you're gonna be paying off, $7-8 million a year on the actual, principal, as it grows over time. 43 and 49, you can see we have a fund balance there of about 55 million, or 59 million yearly, I should say 58.3 million. We have $1.5 million of revenue and 55.5 of expense. So I'm still anticipating at the end of 25-26, we'll still have about $4 million because we'll always have some of those expenses as the project wraps up in June and July. And we'll also always have some retainage that we've held until we are satisfied with all work and release those dollars. What exactly it'll be, I can't tell you, but I mean, I'm anticipating that there'll be a little bit left over that we'll be still paying on the new high school as we get into the 26-27 school year. And then Fund 50, food service. One thing I did change, you can see up where the budget is, or for the fund balance at the top of, we're going the other way, Chandra, down to Fund 50. There I think we're right up. One more, there you are. And so, we started with a fund balance of 713. You see it's an ending of 163. Two things going in there. When I presented this to you in May or June, we were planning, and our budget still shows it for the building project, of taking $600,000 of fund balance from Fund 50 to pay for equipment for the new high school kitchen. Because we've moved some expenses from Fund 10 to Fund 50, such as our delivery person who moves meals around the district, we're now like budgeting about a $50,000 potential deficit in Fund 50. So I'm not sure that I'm gonna wanna transfer 600,000 from Fund 50 to the building project. So we'll likely take $500,000 over to it, and that'll leave, even after we're all said and done, $164,000 in fund balance. And the state's been on us for probably 7-8 years to bring the fund balance down. We've been waiting for this project to be able to do that. And so that'll get us kind of back in line to a number that they should be happy with.
Do we still provide services to St. Victor's?
St. Vic's does, they buy the meals, and so does Head Start, basically on an a la carte basis. The YMCA does as well. And so we basically come up with a net cost per meal, and then they buy them as if they're, an a la carte, or as if you were like an adult buying a meal. And so it covers our costs and a little markup in there as well, so.
That was my question, if we're providing it at cost.
No, there is a markup in there, yep. I know we've had another entity inquire about it, and we're kind of at somewhat our capacity as far as our time for our delivery guy making around, as well as some of our kitchen until we get set into the new high school and actually see how the new high school works. Then we might have some capacity, but I don't know, like in the short term, that we have the capacity to do any more than what we're doing right now. And then Fund 80, you can see the fund balance came down last year as they finished out their project, which last 22-23, their fund balance would have been even higher. But you can see they have a balanced budget this year. And when we talk about the levy, it actually goes down a little bit.
And Ron, on the capital projects, referendum projects, are we all done with Abe?
Yep, Abe is wrapped up, so, yeah. So any remaining, I mean, we had some remaining dollars, we were able to use it, for the finish out things this year, and then any other remaining dollars just become part of the full high school Abe project, and so, as we need them, we have those available. Yep. I'm just glancing quickly, I don't think we need to go over what line items changed, since, June, July. If you wanna open it, basically, the biggest thing that changed in the revenues, was the reduction in the estimate, that we're hearing is likely to come from the state. Now, obviously, I don't know that final number until October 15th comes around, because as every district puts in, their annual report, it will change a little bit. You don't need to pull this one up, John, this is just a short report. If you wanna pull up the tax apportionment schedule, when we get to that, we can talk about that. But so on the change document for the board, the big change was, that was a reduction, was in the state general aid estimate. And there was an increase, in the other state aid, the 690s by that, property tax exemption. Remember, that went from, I said it used to be 122 and it was a little over 300,000 now. On the expenditure side, updated all the staffing, updated, all the benefits, reran all the numbers. The two biggest lines that changed, in regular curriculum and vocational curriculum, we saw some reductions, and that was really based upon a couple of positions that opened up that we didn't fill. And then the other line you see changing is that interfund operating transfer, where we got the new projected revenue for Fund 27 for special education, which reduced our transfer to Fund 10. So those were really the biggest changes that happened between June and now. Going to the tax apportionment schedule. I'll pull this one up, Chandra. There we go. Right now, this is built with a projected equalization value growth of 6%. Our state experts are anticipating that for Greene County, it's gonna be somewhere between 7 and 8%, quite likely maybe 7.2 to 7.5. So it's at 6%, it's kind of conservatively done. Again, it's really, we'll talk about what the levy change is, because that's really the bigger point. But I mean, it does come into play a little bit with the perspective for how people look at things. In the middle of the sheet is where you see the levies. Again, that general fund levy is showing a significant increase because of the reduction in state aid, and the $325 per pupil increase, even though much of it will go away next year with the decline of enrollment. But with the exemption in there and with no additional state aids, Fund 10 levy gets impacted by 7.5%. Again, debt service is expected to kind of grow, kind of like what they would expect valuation to grow long-term over time, so that's at 2.3%. And then the community service fund, we actually reduced that a little bit, so it was down 4. Total net impact of levy is 4.4%. And again, if you read articles from around the state, almost every district that is aided is seeing the same thing, because they're getting less state aid because of no dollars being put in the formula, getting less from the Milwaukee. And then some districts are seeing more of an impact if they're having less decline of an enrollment, or if they're lucky enough to have an increase in enrollment. So where that additional 325, they're getting the full kick on it, then they're also seeing that impact them. So this will be a thing, but it's not a Monroe thing. And I think, as we have to point out, as I did in June, the state every year prioritizes where the tax relief will come. And typically they put it into the state school general aid in order to offset the cost of property taxes. This year, they put it into the income tax savings. And so some people may see the same savings they always did. Some people may see savings that they never got before if they weren't a property taxpayer. And some people may see not much of a benefit, but they put it into the income tax saving side of the world. I know a lot of that was focused toward the seniors And so some of the same people who are probably most impacted by the property taxes are also impacted by the income taxes if they're seniors. So hopefully some of those people will come out even or maybe even a little ahead. But we don't really control that. We're just along for the ride a bit there. And then in the property tax levy history, you know, we're obviously, if we go way to the bottom, we're still, this is in the levy history document. Sean, if you want to pull it up. If you don't have time, we're not gonna talk that long about it, but, yeah, if you go all the way to the bottom of that. So you can see down at the bottom, at 14.4 million, yep, we're up from last year. We're still, you know, over $1 million down from where it was 2 years ago. You know, obviously when the operating referendum dollar authorizations went away, you know, last year, so that was part of that drop. But we're still less than where we were in 22, 23. And so, you know, we are coming down as far as in the grand scheme of things like that. However, you know, if we were able to pass our operating referendum, it would bring some of that back. And then as you go over to, you know, the levy rate, part of it driven by the extreme increases in property valuation over the last 4 to 5 years. The levy rate is the lowest it's ever been by over $2 going back in time. I think you gotta go back to the 90s when it was under 10, and it's down to, you know, right now it's projecting at 722 and likely, with it coming in higher in October, it'll probably be even less than that. So. But again, a lot of that valuation change, I think, is not quite as impactful as it was a couple of years ago when it was literally all just revaluation of residential. Still, the majority of it is the increase of residential, but I think there is a couple % of new growth in there. But if it's going up 8%, that still means that much of that is just revaluing of current residential properties.
In a 6% total equalized valuation, 25, 26, that's your projected.
Yeah, they're projecting it'll actually be higher. But, you know, I'd rather give them a number and it come in less than that than the other way around. Now, the only thing that could change would be if suddenly like if our voucher pupils would grow much higher than I expected, you know, I hope that's not the case. But, you know, suddenly they tell me that number's, you know, 350,000 instead of 220. I hope that's not gonna be the case. But, you know, that's one of those that we don't know until they tell us in October what that number is. I raised it from 173 to 220. You know, but it could come down or stay the same. It could increase a lot more.
Ron, the action that we're looking to take tonight is to approve the preliminary budget. That'll be kind of the content, therefore, that we bring to the annual meeting. So is there questions from board members to get answered in advance of voting on approval?
I don't really have a question, Jim. I guess this is a question to Ron. The documents we looked at, are they available to the public?
So what we'll do from now is we'll take what we have tonight, some of these documents like the official budget adoption document, a condensed version of that will go directly into the paper in advance of the annual meeting. Chowder and I will take all the information tonight as well as other additional information, build out the annual meeting booklet. That's typically ready a couple weeks in advance, a week or two in advance of the annual meeting, so probably by, you know, that second Monday or so in October, we should have that. And then they can have it in advance of the annual meeting. We have a few people who pick it up every year in advance of the annual meeting. Most pick it up at the annual meeting.
Transparency is really important.
Yep.
So around the budget cycle, it's weird, right? Because the district's budget cycle runs on a different time frame than the state's budget cycle. So do you anticipate short-term debt service this year? And if so, is that cost figured into this budget?
We're gonna try and, so yes and yes. We're gonna try and avoid short-term cash flow borrowing this year if we can. I'm gonna prepare for short-term cash flow borrowing, in the sense of, there's a couple of avenues, we can approach it. Typically in years past, I mean, when we had full year, borrowing, we would do, once upon a time, we would actually issue bonds and we would have bonds out. And then we went to a line of credit with our bank. And so we're gonna probably have a couple of avenues. I may extend our line of credit that we have with the Bank of New Glarus, just in case we need it for like a 4 to 6 week period there in early December. The WISC, which is the Wisconsin Investment Series Cooperative, who we participate with as part of our investments for the building project. They also have a way that they're leveraging the balances from all the districts combined to be able to offer competitive borrowing to other districts. So if you think of it as you're a district with some fund balance and you want to get a little better rate than just leaving it sit in the account. Meanwhile, there's some districts who are needing to access money, who would like to borrow for a little less than maybe what the bank rate is. They're facilitating that process to happen for those short time periods. So I'm gonna be talking to the people who represent not only our investment for the new high school, but also work with WISC so that we have some options there. And so if we need it, we're gonna be able to access that. Have I built in a set inflationary cost? No, because I really don't think we're gonna be borrowing that much for that long this year. Next year, we would have to be budgeting it in, yeah, because after we use some additional fund balance this year, and then what you'll be doing next year, or I will be doing next year, I should say, you guys, through me, we'll be looking at what is the interest rate opportunities out there versus what are the interest rate borrowing costs that are out there. Are we better off only borrowing for that short period of time and paying that interest for usage over that short period of time? Or if the world is upside down and you can potentially make enough on interest revenue to help offset some of what those borrowing costs are, sometimes you can make some positive arbitrage over the course of the year and actually be better off borrowing for the full year. And so that'll be the cost benefit analysis. It's really dependent upon what are the bank rates, what are the long-term investment rates, like if you're in one of those pooled things, whether it be WISC, whether it be the local government property insurance fund, or not property, local government investment fund. LGIF is always slow when interest rates are climbing. They trail. As interest rates come down, they hold their value longer. So at times you'll reach a point where you can tax-free borrow from a bank for less than you're making in the local government investment fund. And if that's the case, then you borrow the money for the whole year. And you might not make money for the whole year, but you might make enough money on those months when you have a positive balance to offset the costs that you have in those months when you're behind. You understand what I'm saying? So.
But at the end of the game, if you have a net gain, you have to pay that to the IRS in this scenario or not?
Depends how much other borrowing you have and what the amount of the borrowing is. You could do one tax-free borrowing for a certain amount per year. But if you have other multiples, so even if you're just taking a lease on a copier, that could preclude you from doing that. Certainly, as we talked about with our investments on the high school project, because of the size of it and the fact that it's covering multiple years, you can't make more money on interest than what you're paying. And so that does apply in the short-term market. However, there are some exceptions, which if you're only borrowing for less than a year, and if it's less than a certain amount, and it's the only borrowing you're doing that year, where you can get around that. So, obviously, when I lived in, not obviously, but when I was in Northland Pines, a district that was completely unaided, and so they didn't get any revenues until January. They were annually having to short-term cash flow borrow for the months of June through January. So that was kind of an annual thing up there that I always had to make that analysis on.
Any other questions from board members on?
Until you have that short-term borrowing experience that we can leverage in these trying times.
It was nice for the years that we didn't have to use it.
We'll do a quick kind of recap of the headlines for both to check my own understanding, but to kind of move us into a motion if folks are ready. So essentially, we cut $1 million and also had increased costs in other areas, so therefore our total budget is pretty close to flat. That includes a $2 million deficit. State funding went down, therefore the amount that we need to ask for or kind of secure through property taxes goes up by about $500,000 or 4.4%. And that's what we'll be presenting to the public in about a month.
Absolutely, great.
All right,
Put on the radio if you don't need me.
All right, I would entertain a motion to approve the 25-26 preliminary operating budget for the 2025 annual meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Phil,
Second.
second by Mike Davis. Any discussion before we vote? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thanks so much, Ron. All right, next up, I've got this listed as informational, but I think we discussed last time potentially taking action on this. And so just to kind of connect the dots from last meeting, we started to have a conversation where some board members expressed, based on our current budget reality, that again, Ron so skillfully prepared and took us through in the past several minutes, that we're looking at the decision on whether or not we're gonna have to go to an operating referendum in the spring. And it would, I think, benefit us to have this discussion and open about the extent to which members of the board wish to make that declaration public. And so I will open it up. If there are board members who would like to share either their desire for making that clear tonight, or if there are folks who have questions on their mind that they want to share, or even if there are folks on the board who want to express reservations or concerns on why they might not be ready to make that resolution or vote yes on a resolution of that type tonight.
Jim, and maybe Ron, with your help, can I just take a second to try to connect the budget conversation you just had with this conversation? And as we were going through the budget, I was thinking, you know, alternatives are referendum, or probably, like, to balance our budget right now is roughly 7%. We'd have to cut across the board. You figure inflation plus that debt service, probably for next year's budget, we're 10% that we have to cut to balance our budget.
Yeah, it wouldn't be quite, I mean, the debt service is what the debt service is, and that's outside of the revenue limit. Certainly, you're starting, as you said, Mike, with a $2 million deficit right now. You're looking at, you know, potentially whatever growth there is, and we know that our revenue limit base isn't gonna really grow from this year to next year. So all those things end up adding on top of each other. And I didn't do the math on a percentage, but, so that is going to be, you know, you're talking 2 million on a, you know, $33 million budget. And like you know, said, it's gonna likely grow to a little more than that. And not necessarily seeing our revenues probably increase what expenditures are. At least that's not the way it's been looking the last 2 years, and I'm not sure it's gonna be looking that way next year. So all those things are true, and I think partly what I heard the board struggling with last month, I believe, was and so I don't think you have to do, quote, a resolution tonight, but I think partly what was, some people were struggling with was, I can't say that we're going to an operating referendum until I know that the board has made that determination, right? So I keep kind of couching it in, well, we may, right? And I think what some of the board members were saying is, let's just talk about, we're going to one. We won't know until December what the ask is, what the cost and the impacts are, because as, you know, part of it is going to be, after 3 years of cuts, is there additional cuts we can make to lower the number? I don't know. That'll be part of the board discussion. You know, are there some things that we cut, or just that we know costs are going up that might raise that number? And so I think those things are the uncertainty that we won't know until we get closer to December. But I think the question is as Joe's on the radio or I'm on the radio, are we talking about, we haven't made a decision yet whether or not we're going to referendum because the board hasn't made that decision and won't likely until December? Or is some of the conversation, given the reality of that budget, which you just, you know, also pointed out, do we know we're going to operating referendum? Let's tell people we're going to be going to operating referendum next spring, but we don't know yet the details or what that looks like. And so I think that's kind of what I was hearing. And
That was my point last month in saying that we're not at resolution point. We don't know if we're going for X amount or Y amount and recurring or non-recurring. But I think if we all feel like at least a thumbs up as to are we signaling that we're going to referendum, that helps you guys when you're getting asked that on the radio. Or when you're asked it in the public, or I've already been asked it for months. I don't, maybe no one else has, but I have been. And so I think it's helpful to provide clarity to the yes, that's what we're working toward. Unless we're not. But I think at least we owe that to provide some clarity to the public. And then from there, we figure out, well, what's it look like? But now at least it's not this hidden secret that we don't know. Well, really? I can do math, right? Unless we're gonna make some significant cuts, we're gonna have to. So that was my point in bringing that up last month. It was more of a, is everybody in a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or where are we even at for a pulse? Because I think that just helps.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I'm talking about connecting them is because for me, that discussion I follow the logic, right? So 10% budget reduction, that's not, like, there's a certain percentage of that total 33 million that we can't cut, right? It's just there. So that means, let's say that means the things we can cut, that's 15 or 20% we have to cut. Like, we cannot do that without drastically affecting the level of service that we can provide our students in this district. So for me, we have to run a referendum. The value, I don't know yet. We're gonna count on Ron to bring that, right? But like, we're talking a huge cut to our services budget. I mean, if you think,
People in programs.
yeah, it's big. It's super impactful.
So Ron, to review the last 2 years, and Joe too, I guess, what's the magnitude of the cuts? 2 million?
1.9, I think, over the last 2 years, is that?
that was before the $1 million we cut this year.
So, last 2 years,
That were the last, I would say over the last 4 years, I would say that wasn't that I'm trying to, without pulling it up. We had the one slide, which was the 3-year impact, and then we had the additional 1 million. And I don't have that pulled up in front of me.
So what was identified for this year was 1 million, right?
Yeah.
The year prior to that was 900,000, correct?
Yeah, I was going even longer, yeah, than we had
And then-
cuts before that.
If I'm remembering.
1.4 for 3 years before this year.
Yeah, so it's 2.5, almost over the 3.
so we've cut 2.5 million over the last 3 years out of the operating budget. Nothing to do with the new high school, right? We have a $2 million budget deficit in this year's budget, which we're backfilling by drawing down our fund balance by 2 million projected now to be year-end at 3.3 million. If we don't do anything, we're borrowing money next year. Is that safe to say?
Yep.
I just don't see any way around it. The referendum that we had in place that expired was it filled a structural deficit. I think we're not the only district seeing that. And I just can't see any way around it, that we have to ask our community to support a referendum. Amount to be determined, duration to be determined, recurring, non-recurring. That's what we'll decide by December. So that's where I'm at on the straw poll, Jim.
I'm in total agreement with you on that, Phil. You know, if we want to run a quality school, I mean, we have to have it. We absolutely have to. I mean, I can't imagine continuing trying to run, even with the deficit that we have right now, just breaking even. It doesn't make sense. And it certainly doesn't make sense to have to go and borrow just to operate. Not in my mind anyway. That's not the way I would want to operate. Yeah, it isn't something you certainly would want to do, but it's something that you really have to do if you're gonna survive. That's bottom line, that's what it is. So.
I don't think I have anything to add, but I concur with all of that.
I just don't see where we can cut any more without being really detrimental to, you know, the services we deliver. And if we want to keep our services where they are and our academic progress where we're going, I just don't see how we can keep cutting. We just can't cut anymore. I don't think people realize that we have cut down to the bone. And if we cut more, it is gonna be extremely painful in every aspect across our district. And so I feel like we have to go to referendum. We don't have another choice.
Same.
I think the referendum question this coming spring is gonna come up at just about every school in the state of Wisconsin, due to some of the things the state's done to it, to the school districts. That said, I think it's gonna force all the school districts, including our own, take a good hard look at how we're running our operations. I mean, if we can save anything anywhere, I mean, we have cut $2 million in the last 2 years. But, you know, I would hope that it didn't come at the cost of a lesser education for our kids. You know, and I don't think it has. So that said, my personal feeling is there was some fat to be cut. I mean, there is in any business, private business or local entity. I think the school district has done that, but prior to running the referendum, and I'm not opposed to running a referendum, but we need to take a good hard look at the way we operate and make sure we're doing our due diligence for the taxpayers. Because we have to remember, you know, we're in kind of an aged community. There's a lot of retired people, and half of their property tax bill goes to Monroe school districts. I mean, they may have grandkids here, but I mean, we have to be a little bit sensitive to them too. And as a school district and as a school board, it should be all about the kids. But we can't forget who's funding the schools. So, I mean, that said, I mean, I think between now and December, if any of us could come up with any ideas where we could have a cost savings for the community members, we need to do that, whether we run a referendum or not. If we do, I mean, we need to show that we're doing our due diligence here. And I think that would gather a lot of support in the community.
Right, if I respond to that quickly.
I would, if I could just for a second, I agree with most of what you said, Steve. I really think that is something that we have to take and continue to look at. Every business does. But I still think that with this last cut, I think that we did lose, that the students are not.
I agree with you
as
too.
off as what they were.
Yes.
We did cut a German program totally out. There were,
Busing for
what, 40, 50
No elementary
kids
librarians
that were in
anymore.
that. Librarians took a hit. aids, a lot of different aids where the kids that need help, the help isn't there. You know, you don't see that every day. You get in and you go in and sit in a couple of classrooms, that's where you're gonna notice it. You know, and that's the part that is concerning me. But I totally agree, it's something that we really have to continue. Everyone has that responsibility being on this board. And if we see anything, we certainly have to question it. You know, we can't be afraid to come out and ask the question. But, you know, it's just my fear that, you know, when we go, we just have to make sure with the amount, where it's going, different things like that it's extremely clear. And I think also if we do decide to go, we have to have on the opposite side, we have to say, okay, fine, if for some reason this doesn't go, these are some of the things that you're gonna lose. You know, and from what I'm seeing right now, it's not gonna be pretty. I mean, there are going to be a lot of extracurricular things that are gonna be gone along with, you know, some educational funding. So, you know, those are the things we need to consider.
Thanks, Mike. I'm gonna give Joe a chance to respond before I do. Yeah, thank you for providing that.
No, I mean, Mike shared some of the things that I was thinking. I just want to say to Steve, I appreciate what you said, and I think that's fair, to be honest. I think if we're going to work through this challenge, we have a responsibility to be open, transparent, honest, provide all the information related to our decision-making so people can come to a level of understanding. Because the reality is, and I think everyone here would acknowledge it, there's some folks that live in our community that have tough decisions to make. And sometimes we're quick to jump to, these people support kids in schools and these people don't, and I don't necessarily believe that. I think what we have is some people that have some real financial challenges that they're working through. And in order for them to make an informed decision, we have to provide a process that clearly identifies what we're doing and why, and how that relates to some of the changes that we've made over the past 2-3 years to provide that full context. And I think if we do that, then I think we can all feel good that we've provided the right information and allow the community to make an informed decision. And I just want you to know, Ron and I have talked a lot about this, Jim and I have talked a lot about this. We're fully committed to making sure that we provide as much clarity and transparency as possible. The last thing we want to do is go through any kind of process and have people feel like they didn't get the information they needed. And so I'm anticipating that we'll have a lot of these conversations at the board level over the next several months. But please know from the administrative team's perspective, we're ready to do the work and answer the questions that the board may have, and the community for that matter.
And Joe, I hear what Steve's saying. We've made some hard cuts, no doubt, and we're to a point where we're affecting kids. But to me, as a board member, admin, I mean, we have a standing order, and that is if we see an opportunity for efficiencies beyond what we've done, with or without referendum, it's our duty and responsibility to attack that. Because we're asking our taxpayers to fund what we're doing. You know, we owe it to them. I just wanted to, you know, emphasize, I guess, what Steve is saying. I agree with that. But I also think we need to go to referendum.
100% agree. I would just add, I think our daily practice demonstrates that we do make those tough decisions. We have a number of positions that as people leave us, we're constantly evaluating opportunities to consolidate, and we've done so in the name of fiscal responsibility. So we'll continue to do that, and we have to do a good job of sharing that information when it happens.
So maybe just two things I want to say, and then I'll open it back up if anyone else has more to add. So what I'm hearing from the board is that folks are clear that we are going to referendum. We've got a path ahead to figure out for what amount. Many other meetings and discussions about the detail of that. But I believe I'm hearing consensus, but I actually want to double check with you, Steve, if you're saying that that's actually where.
I'm not opposed to running a referendum, you know, I mean, because with the budget cuts that the state's handed down to us, you know, basically no extra funding. I mean, not even to accommodate for inflation. And it hasn't been that way for years. I mean, so basically the school districts have been falling backwards. And I understand that completely. And I think the general public, we live in a giving community. I mean, you just take one look at, look at the sponsorship we got for the new school. I mean, every month, every meeting we go through and people are donating money and supplies. You know, and I'm not totally opposed to a referendum. I just want to make sure and make it clear that we need to do our due diligence and run this district as efficient as possible and provide the best education for our kids. You know, Jim made that point when he became president. He made the comment, you know, that most times money follows kids' education. More money gets them a better education, and sometimes that is true. But he, as the president, made that statement when he was elected that he wanted to prove that that's not always the case. You know, we don't have to spend the most money to get the best education. And I really think that this district can do that. You know, we don't have to spend, you know, $20,000 a pupil and have the best education in the United States. But I tell you one thing, I mean, you could see it, that report that was put out by US News and Report. I mean, there was a lot of trash on Facebook and stuff about that. But I mean, we were one of the best school districts in Greene County. So, I mean, to say that, you know, we're wasteful spending and everything, I don't buy that. You know, but that said, I also think we owe it to the community to just be the most fiscally responsible we can.
I think it's well said. I appreciate that, Steve. And I think a couple points, and I guess I haven't made this explicit, but I also believe we need to go to referendum. And I think in many ways, I think Monroe has proven that what you're describing is possible, right? Because what we are seeing is pretty dramatically improving student results with a relatively efficient staffing structure, right? So all the data that we've seen, even before some of the cuts from last year, is that Monroe is as efficient or more efficient by any metric, student to teacher, student to admin, kind of total FTEs, however you want to look at it, right? So we're seeing really good student results, and yet we're more efficient on the expenditure side, according to most metrics that you can look at. And that just means that the return on investment from Monroe taxpayers right now is strong. We just can't run a deficit, right? We cannot continue to run a $2 million deficit. And so I believe we need to do this. I appreciate everybody weighing in. Thank you for sharing your honest perspectives. And I guess we'll not look for a resolution, but appreciate the convo, and hopefully that gives Joe and Ron what you all need for next steps.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Anything
Jim, is there
else? Yeah.
a reason we wouldn't just make a resolution?
Well, typically, a resolution is a more formal part of the process where we seek advice from legal counsel, and we're not there yet. That'll happen down the road. I think, you know, going back to Nikki's original statement, I think we were looking for an informal heads up. So, for example, when I'm speaking to the radio tomorrow, I can say this is where the board is at this point, and it allows me to be more clear, and I think what you just did accomplishes that. And then the resolution will come down the line. Ron's done a nice job of sketching some of those steps out for us, and we'll probably be looking for a resolution somewhere in December. Is that accurate, Ron?
Yeah, so we can do it whenever we're ready, but I would have, the original timeline I pointed out, I would aim for start of December. That gives us all of kind of December to start preparing, and then January through April to work on that information campaign so people know what we're doing. If we're ready to have that sooner, that's great, but really, I think, for me personally, but I think Joe and I both, I don't want to go out and talk to the public and say, yep, we're going to a spring referendum, and have them call any of you and you guys go, we haven't said that, or we haven't made that decision, because we're not making that final decision until December. But this gives us that understanding of, we're not playing games with you, community. We want you to know we're not giving you an answer to deceive you. We were not giving an answer to put you guys in a bad spot. Now at least we can say, yep, we know we're looking at a spring referendum. Everything has been pointing to that for some time and is certainly pointing that way now. And we'll get those details worked out, you know, whether it's reductions, whether it's ads, the amount, the type of question, all those things over the next few months. We're not there yet. However, that's where we're headed, so.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Moving on to informational item, we've got mental health updates. It's kind of a follow-up from the question that Mike Froseth asked at our last meeting, or maybe the meeting before. So appreciate you all bringing it back. Turn it over to administration.
All right, so Todd pointed out that I have 5 minutes. Joe gave you 5 minutes.
It's on the clock.
So he's gonna be timing me because he wants to go home.
No, it's not what I said. I think it's a difficult task, all right? 5 minutes and this much information.
So Micah, first of all, I appreciate just bringing this up because I do think it's a really important topic that we probably don't talk about enough. It's just where we are right now with our children and adolescents in regard to their mental health. So I wanted to start with the first couple of slides. They just kind of point out where we are as a nation, and then I'll get to where we are in Monroe. But in looking, I've known this, but to look at all of the current information that's out there, it is a little bit gut-wrenching. They are saying that we are in the midst of a mental health crisis. We are hearing this all the time, but I guess to put it in those words is very alarming. They were seeing a significant increase in some anxiety and depression prior to COVID, but since the pandemic, it's just accelerated at such a rate that it's difficult to treat. And the most current statistic there, I think, is really troubling by the APA is that 22% of adolescents, again, this is in the nation, have seriously contemplated suicide. So what happens then is that students, like the chronic absenteeism that we're talking about all over the nation, that's an issue. That's a result of mental health issues. Why is this happening? So we're blaming cell phones quite a bit. But it's more than that. It's what they're being exposed to on the social media platforms. Once it's in their algorithm with mental health disorders, it just keeps popping up. So there's also this piece of just like almost sensationalism, self-diagnosis, and then not recognizing sometimes it is just being a teenager is really hard, and sometimes just it's developmentally just a phase that you go through. But it's taken it to the extreme. So I don't think that's a surprise to anybody that that's having such an impact on our adolescents. Some risk factors, so students who are more susceptible to having serious mental health issues are those in poverty, housing instability, like a lack of insurance, towards getting therapy and counseling, what's perceived as bullying, LGBTQ group, Native Americans. So our work here and what we work with our staff is that we are trying to mitigate like all of these risk factors as much as we can. Our job is just to make sure that we're taking care of every kid and that they have the emotional safety, but emotional safety as well as physical safety within the school setting. So I wanted to show you just a graph. Again, this is the United States and how much anxiety has increased. So I think it's just a nice representation just to look at how significant of an issue it is. And then you will see that there's quite a gap between anxiety and depression, even though anxiety and depression are the top two. And it's because anxiety just covers so many different areas. It's trauma, it's obsessive compulsive disorder, and just overall generalized anxiety. So that and if you've talked to any teenagers recently or children, you will see it. There's a lot of pressure just to kind of be perfect and to do well that they put on themselves, but it's also part of that social media influence. So the next slide is just Monroe and where we're sitting. This is taken from our results from last year, a social emotional screening. It looks at about 20 to 25% of students are scoring elevated. So it's broken down into 3 different categories. One is like a normal range and then elevated and then significantly elevated. And this is where our school psychologists and our school counselors meet with every single student who comes up in an elevated range, which takes a lot of time, but that's okay, because that's what we need to do, just to make sure that they're getting everything that they need, and then they communicate with families on that. So then we have a 40% chronic absenteeism in our district. And we've talked about that a little bit, and then our special education rate. So a lot of our students with mental health issues often are in our special education population too. Okay, so I want to break down for you why are we talking about this, and why is it such an important thing that we're constantly focused on. So because it affects everything, not only now, but it affects their future. It affects all of their personal relationships. It affects their ability to deal with challenges, to problem solve. The effects are huge if it's not something that we're paying attention to and trying to help kids. So in Monroe, you've probably heard several times we talk about this, we're our academic side, that we have a multi-tiered system of support to help students. Basically, it's getting what they need. And so we do the same thing with our mental health side. So tier 1 is our side of universal supports, and that's all students receive this, which I think is, and if you look at this list, it's really comprehensive, and this isn't everything. This also means that like all of our staff are responsible for this. So that's our core curriculum and guidance. We have bullying prevention that we've added in, our PBIS that we use throughout the district. Homerooms, I was just looking at some middle school activities that they're doing. They talk a lot about taking care of themselves.
PBIS.
Oh, positive behavioral interventions and supports. So it's like, be respectful, be responsible, be safe. And I was trying to be better about that, Mike.
I'll call you.
But it's like it's all the rules of the school, but it's also more than that. It's about how to get along with others, how to be like a hard worker in the classroom, like all of those things, those skills that create some grit and some resilience. Our health courses, the staff trainings that we do, relationship mapping, which is literally we take every single student and make sure that they are linked to someone like an adult in the building. So our buildings do that. Sometimes it's not every year, but it's usually like at least every other. And then of course our district's instructional priorities. This is really important. Establishing relationships with kids, engagement practices. It's not just about the academics. It is, right? Because we know it leads to those outcomes, but it's also like we care about kids and we want the best for them. So the data tracking that we do on a regular basis is attendance, tardies, office discipline referrals, and we, as you know, we have students take the surveys. And so our pupil services team, which consists of our school psychologists, school counselors, and principals, meet every single week in every building and talk about these things. And they talk about kids, and they talk about what we need to do, what we're not doing, what they need, what they've noticed. And it's just been a really effective system. Joe was insistent upon that several years ago, and I would say it really took the level of our supports up significantly, just because we were talking about kids every single week and staying on top of it and making sure that nobody fell through the cracks. Our tier 2 is more just for our at-risk kids, and then they kind of go into a different level. We do small groups, we do individual counseling, check in, check out, which is students check in with an adult every single morning and they check out with them as well. And it's always just a greeting, how was your night, how is your morning going? Just so they have that positive contact every single day. It's very successful. Mentoring programs that we have, that can be either with an adult or a student. We set up behavior plans, early intervention strategies, and then we're, of course, working with families. We never want to leave that out. Tier 3 is our intensive supports, and this is like students that we're really, really concerned about. So this may involve individualized counseling and plans, if they need some special education supports, 504 plans, crisis response trainings, wraparound, which is typically with our Greene County Human Services. I was just at a meeting with them today where we have a strong partnership and just trying to make sure that, again, we're working with families in order to help kids. The next slide here. So a couple of important pieces with this is that, so we contract with a company called Care Solace. And they're a company that families can reach out to on their own, or we can have what we call a warm handoff. Is that what it is, Joe? Oh, and so we can basically do the work for them, but it sets them up in being able to talk with somebody who will connect them with a counselor. So, like a therapist who's maybe able to do virtual, if it works in their schedule, whatever works for the family. So that's been something that over the past few years, you can see 93 cases. I think that's pretty substantial. So, I mean, we're helping a lot of families, we're helping a lot of kids. We even have adults, and sometimes our staff will call and they'll set it up that way. It's very private, very confidential, but it's a great link that's been very successful and really saves the legwork of our school counselors and school psychs trying to set up therapists, especially local, because everyone has a really, really long waiting list. I don't know if you knew that, but. And then we do have really strong partnerships with Orion Avenues, Main Street Counseling, where just last year alone, we had over about 70 students served, and that means that therapists are coming into the schools. We have rooms set aside that's private, confidential at a good time. It's typically like 30 to 45 minutes where they meet with a therapist on a regular basis, and sometimes the parents will come in as well. And I will say these organizations have just been wonderful to work with, and it's great to have them as partners. So we're really helping kids. Yeah.
If the child's family needs outside care or service, but they may not have the financial wherewithal to do that, how does that happen? I mean, they aren't ignored, are they?
Yeah, so sometimes the insurance is the biggest barrier, and unfortunately, sometimes then there's not this opportunity, but then that's where our school psychologists and school counselors can jump in and maybe do, probably not the same level, just don't have the time, right? But they are able to support students in that manner. Really good partnerships. Because we were talking about suicide threats, so I thought it was important to just have an awareness of like what happens when a student is talking about harming himself or others. We do have plans, safety protocols set up for both sides, like if it was gonna be with others, that's that threat assessment piece, which is with Officer Quinn, and it's a very different process. But if they're talking about harming themselves, we have a very, very strict protocol that we go through. We make phone calls, we set up safety plans. So it is a little bit of, you drop everything, and then you're working with that student and trying to figure out how serious of a threat it is or not, and then setting up supports and services. So I can tell you that, I mean, I've seen this firsthand, our school psychologists and school counselors, principals staying late at night just to make sure, because they don't want to release the child to anybody, and making sure that kids are taken care of. So it's a great system. So it's very supportive. And then finally, just some challenges and gaps in, kind of spoke to this, Phil. Sometimes you can't get a therapist that in town, locally, insurance is an issue. And just that social media piece is really hard to stay on top of, and it's really difficult for parents to stay on top of. And kids, they keep so much to themselves. They're not talking as much as they used to. In many instances, and some they're great about it, but in many instances they're keeping it to themselves. So our work over the next couple of years is really just going to be to strengthen that tier 1 and tier 2. I think we've got our individualized supports, like we have quite a bit in place, but building that resilience with kids is going to be really important. As I wrap up here, I just want to say, like, the board has always been very supportive, and I know it was difficult. We had to make a reduction in a school counselor that resulted in, like, Abe Lincoln has a shared school counselor, but a full-time school psych. But I've sitting back there, sitting on the other end, I'm just thankful for the board always being so supportive and understanding how important this is, that we're taking care of our students, because that's just, it's the right thing to do, right? So thank you for that, and shout out to all of our staff. I mean, it's our kitchen staff, it's our office secretaries, talking to kids, noticing things, and then referring on if they have concerns. We have a very compassionate staff who really, really care about kids, so we're lucky to have them. They do incredible work.
5 minutes, right on
Was
it, right on the dot. So, I mean, just super, to me, very reassuring, and thank you to the administration staff, what we're doing as a district, but also, like, extremely scary, right? I mean, 1 in 5, 1 in 4 kids, that means almost every time I'm hanging out with one of my children and a group of their friends, one of those children has contemplated suicide. Talk to your kids.
Right.
Like, parents, grandparents, like, don't stigmatize it, talk about it.
That's right. And I
My
do,
Lord.
yeah,
Just
it's,
Thank you
yeah.
for bringing this to us.
It's not easy being a kid anymore,
Mm-mm,
you know?
mm-mm. Yes,
If we wanted to see just a little bit more in depth on these different tier levels,
Yeah.
is that something that we could take a look at?
absolutely, yes. If you want to set up a time with me, I'd be happy to even, like, go deeper.
I would love to.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Any other questions from board members?
I talked really fast.
Well, the district's doing a lot, and it
The
is,
district's a lot.
it's a really heavy topic and really important, so I appreciate, Mike, you raising this point, and just, obviously, it's something that the district has been working to address for a long time with support from the board, and, yeah, it's heavy to look at the stats, and heartening also to see the many ways in which our team has taken this on, so thanks again for bringing this to us. Okay. We are on to informational items. Boardmanship Administration, Joe, you got anything? Nope. Got nothing to add. Board of Ed correspondence, nothing there. Liaison reports, nobody. Committee reports, start down there with Nicole.
We have a
Terry?
meeting tomorrow.
PAE meets tomorrow at noon.
The finance met prior to the board meeting to review
Teresa?
Curriculum will start meeting in October, so we'll meet before the first meeting in October, and then October 28th is when Eric Larson is going to review report cards. And then Todd has put together a good agenda for each of our monthly meetings for curriculum that will happen typically the first meeting of the month.
Thank you. Mike F.?
Just something, maybe a big shout out to administration and Jeremy in particular. You know, since our last meeting, the political environment, and Jeremy sent out an email to families and students very quickly that was very, very well written, and I think did a really good job of setting the expectation for our district, our students, our families, right from the get-go. And that was very much appreciated from me as a board member and a parent.
Ditto. Thank you for bringing that up.
And I can tell you, as a guy who was around a lot of his peers at that superintendent's conference, there were many districts that did not fare as well as us, and I would agree. I think much of that was due to Jeremy's message, which I think not only calmed the nerves of kids and parents, but I think the community as well. I think it was a well-received message, so great job by Jeremy. Steve?
No, I agree with what Mike said about that note that Jeremy put out. That was really well written, you know.
Mike B? Nikki?
We had the Greene County Fall Nationals tractor pull, and just a shout out to our Key Club, Tom Stroh, and those kids were amazing. And we just have really great kids in our district, and they're willing to step up and help in so many different ways. And our Kiwanis Club really needed help, and they were fantastic. So just a shout out to him and those kids.
Cool. Everybody, nothing else from me. Agenda items for future discussion. Going once, going twice. Sold, I guess. 5 minutes for the press, nobody here tonight. So next, we're gonna be moving into closed session. So according to Wisconsin statute 1985 1C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, evaluation of interim superintendent and review of goals for 25-26. So to entertain a motion at 9:10 to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Terry.
Motion by Terry, second by Mike Davis, to adjourn into closed session according to Wisconsin statute 1985 1C for the purpose of discussing the evaluation of interim superintendent and review of goals for 25-26. Nikki, please call.
Yep, and just so I'm clear, then we're going to adjourn out. We don't have any action tonight, so we'll adjourn from closed. Okay. Nikki Austin, yes. Jim Curran?
Yes.
Mike Davis?
Yes.
Mike Rosseth?
Yes.
Cole Josephs?
Yes.
Teresa Keen?
Yes.
Steve Mayer?
Yes.
Terry Montgomery?
Yes.
Bill Vesper?
Yes.
You're in closed.
Jerry, I'd look closely